The morning had barely dawned over Tokyo when a tremor not measured on any Richter scale reverberated through the bustling metropolis. Skyscrapers swayed gently as eyes turned skyward, toward a shadow that eclipsed the rising sun. A colossal spaceship, smooth and iridescent, descended with surreal tranquility, hovering above the city's epicenter. In the chaos of scrambling news crews and awestruck civilians, Dr. Elliot Reed hastened through the cordoned streets, his ID badge flapping against his chest. Beside him, his colleague, Dr. Ayasato, an astrophysicist, shared his blend of apprehension and excitement. "This is unprecedented, Elliot," Aya muttered, eyes fixed on the descending Leviathan. "Do you think they're friendly? They sent a message ahead of their arrival, remember? It's a gesture of goodwill, at least that's the hope," Elliot replied, adjusting the straps of his bag. His eyes never left the massive ship. "Our job is to ensure we respond in kind." As they reached the Emergency Operations Center, set up hastily in a nearby building, they were greeted by General Marcus Holden, the military liaison for extraterrestrial contact. "Dr. Reed, Dr. Sato, you're up?" Holden said briskly, ushering them to a bank of monitors showing different angles of the spaceship. "We've established a perimeter, but the whole world is watching. We need to handle this with care." Elliot nodded, turning to the monitors. "Have they made any moves to communicate since entering our atmosphere?" "None, which makes your role crucial, Elliot. When they do, we need you ready to translate and communicate effectively," the general explained. As they strategized, a gentle hum filled the air, a sound that seemed more felt than heard. The crowd outside fell silent as a portion of the ship's hull began to morph, opening like the petals of a flower to reveal the beings within. "They're coming out," Aya breathed, her voice tinged with wonder. On the screen, 3 figures descended from the ship, their bodies encased in shimmering suits that reflected the cityscape. Their leader stepped forward, her movements graceful and measured. Are they?" Elliot's voice trailed off as he took in the leader's appearance. Distinctly humanoid, but with an elegance that was almost ethereal. "Yes, they look human, almost too human," Aya replied. "Makes you wonder about the panspermia hypothesis, doesn't it?" The alien leader paused a few meters from the assembled Earth delegation. She raised her hand, a universal gesture of peace, and began to speak. Her voice was melodic, yet no one understood the lilting syllables that filled the air. Elliot stepped forward, his translator device active. "Greetings from Earth," he began, his voice steady. "We receive you with peace and hope for mutual understanding." The alien leader nodded, her face breaking into a smile. "I am Laera of the Nivarians. We come in peace, seeking kinship with humanity." "Kinship?" General Holden whispered, his brow furrowed. "That's a strong word. What exactly do they want?" Elliot continued to translate, facilitating the burgeoning dialogue. "We have observed from afar and wish to learn from each other, to share knowledge and culture. We believe Earth has much to offer, as do we." The conversation continued, with Elliot and Laera delicately weaving through diplomatic niceties and probing inquiries. As the initial tension melted away, the crowd began to murmur with cautious optimism. By the time the delegation invited the Nivarians to a more formal meeting, the sun was high in the sky, casting a brilliant glow on the historic encounter. Elliot, feeling the weight of his role, glanced back at the crowd and the hovering ship, aware that this was but the first step in what promised to be a monumental chapter in human history. In the days following the Nivarians' arrival, the world buzzed with fervor and speculation. Dr. Elliot Reed found himself at the center of this whirlwind, tasked with an unprecedented mission: to forge a dialogue with an alien race. Alongside him, his colleague and friend, Dr. Michael Chun, a renowned computational linguist, joined the efforts, adding his expertise to decode the Nivarian language. Inside the bustling linguistic lab, a temporary setup filled with screens and recording equipment, Elliot and Michael sat across from Laera and her aides. The atmosphere was thick with concentration, punctuated by the occasional click of keyboards and the soft murmur of conversation. "So, Laera," Elliot started, his voice calm and inviting. "Could you explain how your language structures sentences?" Laera nodded, her eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "Our language is fluid, much like water. It adapts and conforms to the emotional state and context of the conversation. For example," she paused, searching for the right words in English, "the sentence structure and vocabulary shift if I am happy or if I am sad." Michael leaned forward, intrigued. "That's fascinating. It's like your language has built-in empathy. How do you differentiate between factual communication and emotional expressions?" Laera explained, and Michael typed rapidly, his fingers a blur. Every so often, he would stop to clarify a point, ensuring the accuracy of their translations. Elliot, meanwhile, kept the discussion flowing, gently guiding Laera through various topics, from everyday Navarian activities to complex philosophical discussions. He noted every nuance and inflection in her voice, aware that each subtlety could unveil a new layer of understanding. As the session progressed, Laera reciprocated the curiosity about human language. "How do humans manage to keep their language so consistent despite different emotions?" she asked, genuinely puzzled. "It's less about the language adapting to us and more about us adapting the language," Elliot explained. "We use tone, volume, and body language to convey what plain words cannot." The discussion delved deeper into cultural exchanges. Michael suggested, "We should create a virtual interface that can simulate both our languages in real time, maybe even using virtual reality to enhance learning." Laera was excited by the idea. "That would offer a profound leap in our understanding. We have similar technologies but used differently. Perhaps combining our methods could lead to something entirely new." The hours slipped by unnoticed as the group laid the groundwork for what would become the first interstellar linguistic exchange program. They mapped out plans, set goals, and scheduled more sessions, each more promising than the last. As the day wound down, Elliot and Michael walked back to their quarters, their minds alive with possibilities. "Do you think we'll really be able to create a hybrid language?" Michael asked, a slight edge of disbelief in his voice. Elliot smiled, looking up at the stars peeking through the evening sky. "Why not? Language is just another bridge, Michael. And today we've started building it." Their conversation drifted to lighter topics as they continued their walk, but the significance of their task wasn't lost on them. They were not just translating words. They were translating a world, bridging human and Navarian understanding one word at a time. Elliot Reed adjusted his tie for the third time, feeling out of place in the stiff suit required for the cultural exchange ceremony. Beside him, Michael Chun looked equally uncomfortable, fidgeting with the collar of his shirt. "This feels more like a gala than an interstellar collaboration," Michael muttered, tugging at his sleeves. Elliot grinned. "Well, when you're hosting aliens for the first time in history, I suppose pomp and ceremony are part of the deal." The two men stood in a grand hall inside the Navarian ship. It was a masterpiece of engineering, its walls shimmering with faint colors that shifted as though alive. A soft hum of energy pulsed through the air, blending seamlessly with the melodic tones of Navarian music playing in the background. Laera approached them, her usual shimmering attire replaced by a flowing garment of deep emerald, accented by glowing patterns that seemed to dance across the fabric. "I hope the attire is not too uncomfortable," she said with a small smile, her gaze shifting between Elliot and Michael. "It's fine," Elliot replied, though he resisted the urge to loosen his tie again. "And you? Are these events common for you?" "Not quite," Laera admitted, glancing around the room. "The Navarian Council believes formalities create a sense of shared purpose. Personally, I find them distracting." Michael chuckled. "Finally, something we agree on." Liara's lips quirked in amusement. "Then perhaps we should focus on the purpose of tonight, exchanging knowledge. I'd like to show you something." She gestured for them to follow, leading them through a series of arched doorways into a quieter, more intimate chamber. Unlike the grand hall, this room was designed with simplicity in mind. A circular table surrounded by seats, holographic displays projecting both human and Navarian artifacts. "What is this?" Elliot asked, his curiosity piqued. "This is our cultural exchange archive," Laera explained. Each item here represents something significant from our worlds. It's a way to understand each other beyond words. Elliot's eyes landed on a small, glowing orb that hovered in midair. As he reached out, the orb reacted, displaying a hologram of a Navarian city. Its architecture was organic, almost as if the buildings had grown rather than been constructed. "It's beautiful," Elliot said softly. "Your cities look alive." "They are, in a sense," Laera replied. "We've designed them to integrate with our environment rather than disrupt it. And here," she pointed to a nearby pedestal where a piece of earth art, a replica of Van Gogh's Starry Night, hovered alongside a detailed description. "We've admired how your people capture emotion and vision in your art." Michael, meanwhile, was examining a Navarian artifact resembling a crystalline cube. "What's this?" he asked, tilting his head as the cube emitted faint, harmonic tones. Laera stepped beside him. "A memory archive. It stores moments of our history, events, songs, even personal memories. Touch it, and you can experience them." "Seriously?" Michael looked skeptical. "Try it," she encouraged. He hesitated before placing his hand on the cube. Instantly, his expression shifted as his mind filled with alien sights and sounds. A vibrant marketplace bustling with energy, the laughter of Navarian children, the scent of something floral and sweet. "Whoa!" Michael breathed, stepping back after a moment. "That was overwhelming." Elliot watched, fascinated. "It's incredible how your technology connects so directly to your senses. It's like a living history book." Laera nodded. "We value the preservation of experience, not just knowledge. Perhaps one day we could create a similar archive for your world." The exchange deepened as the three of them shared their perspectives, comparing cultural artifacts, discussing music, and even debating philosophy. Elliot found himself drawn to Liara's insights, her way of viewing the universe as a tapestry of interconnected lives and choices. As the evening wore on, Laera gestured toward a set of instruments that resembled elongated flutes. "Would you like to try making music with me? It's a tradition in my culture to create something together during exchanges like this." Elliot and Michael exchanged amused glances. "I'm not much of a musician," Michael admitted, "but I'll give it a shot." Laera handed them each an instrument, showing them how to hold it and produce sound. The first attempts were clumsy, resulting in awkward notes and shared laughter. But as they found a rhythm, a simple melody emerged, a blend of human improvisation and Navarian harmony. When they finally set the instruments down, Laera looked at them with a soft expression. "Thank you for sharing this moment with me. It means more than I can express." Elliot smiled. "The feeling's mutual. I think we've only just begun to understand how much we can learn from each other." As they left the chamber, walking back through the glowing corridors, Elliot turned to Michael. "This is more than I ever imagined when I signed up for this project." Michael smirked. "Yeah, and we're just getting started. Who knows what tomorrow will bring?" Elliot's gaze lingered on Laera, who walked ahead of them, her silhouette illuminated by the ship's soft light. He felt a sense of connection growing, not just between their species but between individuals. For the first time, he began to see the Nivarians not as an alien race, but as people with dreams and emotions not so different from their own. "Let's make sure whatever comes next, we're ready for it," Elliot said, determination in his voice. Michael clapped him on the shoulder. "Always." Dr. Elliot Reed and Michael Chun stood in front of a sleek, obsidian console aboard the Navarian ship, attempting to decipher the intricate control interface. The ship's hum surrounded them, a low and constant reminder of its living, breathing presence. Nearby, Laera gestured at various symbols on a holographic display, explaining how each represented not just commands, but complex interactions between intent, emotion, and technology. "So if this symbol changes based on your mood," Michael asked, squinting at a pulsating blue icon, "how do you maintain consistency in navigation or critical systems?" Laera turned toward him, her expression calm but curious. "It's not the symbol itself that changes, Dr. Chun. Rather, the system understands the context of the operator's feelings and adjusts accordingly. Think of it as an intuitive partner. Michael crossed his arms. Okay, but what happens if the operator is feeling confused? Doesn't that mess everything up? Elliot smirked, watching Liara's patient response. Michael, you're assuming they operate like us. They don't rely on rigid logic. Their tech is more relational. Liara nodded. Exactly. We train extensively so that even in moments of emotional turbulence, the system provides balance. It's a bond, a relationship built over time. Michael sighed. I still can't get my head around it. Human systems don't care how we feel. They just do what we tell them to. Elliot interjected. That's because we haven't yet figured out how to integrate trust into our machines. But maybe we can learn from them. Their discussion was interrupted by a quiet chime from the console. Liara's demeanor shifted as she examined the display, her glowing eyes narrowing. What's wrong? Elliot asked, his voice low. Earth's news broadcasts. There's been an incident, Liara replied. She gestured, and a small projection sprang to life, showing a scene of chaos in a city square. A Navarian was at the center, their luminous attire a stark contrast against the angry mob surrounding them. That doesn't look good, Michael muttered. What happened? The report claims a Navarian scientist used a device to modify the atmosphere near a local food market, Liara explained. It caused a brief temperature shift. The intent was to demonstrate our environmental technology. But the humans there misinterpreted it as a threat. Elliot ran a hand through his hair. A misunderstanding on both sides. The Navarian was trying to help, and the locals thought it was an attack. Liara's voice softened. I had hoped our initial interactions would be more cautious. This demonstration was not authorized by our council. Michael shook his head. It only takes one person on either side to mess things up. Now everyone's going to jump to conclusions. Elliot looked at Liara. Can you speak with your council? Make it clear this was an individual action, not a coordinated effort. I'll do what I can, she said, her expression thoughtful. But it would help if Earth's representatives acknowledged that as well. Perhaps the three of us can present a united message. United message, huh? Michael glanced at the broadcast again, now showing talking heads speculating about Navarian motives. Good luck with that. People love a good panic. Elliot frowned. We have to try. If we let this spiral out of control, it'll only breed more suspicion. Liara stepped closer to the console, her fingers brushing the glowing controls. If you're willing, I can arrange a joint communication session with both councils. Your presence would carry weight. Michael raised an eyebrow. You're asking us to act as diplomats now? Elliot smiled faintly. I think we've been acting as diplomats since the moment they landed. Michael groaned. Fine, but don't expect me to make a speech. Liara inclined her head. I appreciate your support. I'll set the arrangements and notify you when everything is ready. As the group dispersed, Elliot turned to Michael. You sure you're okay with this? Do I have a choice? Michael replied. I don't like public speaking, but I like the idea of a full-scale misunderstanding even less. Good point, Elliot said, patting his friend on the shoulder. Let's make sure we do this right. Back in their quarters later that evening, Elliot and Michael reviewed their notes and prepared for the session. They debated the best way to phrase their statements, trying to strike a balance between reassuring the public and affirming the Nivarians' good intentions. You know, Michael said after a particularly long pause, this would be so much easier if we could just show people what we've seen. The kindness, the collaboration. Words feel so inadequate. Elliot nodded, leaning back in his chair. True, but words are all we have. They're the only tools we can use to bridge the gap. Michael sighed, staring at his notes. I just hope it's enough. As the night wore on, they continued their preparations, determined to prevent one misunderstanding from unraveling everything they'd worked toward. Elliot and Michael sat across from Liara in a quiet chamber deep inside the Navarian ship. The room's crystalline walls softly pulsed with an inner light, casting a soothing glow. A hollow projector between them displayed a rotating model of a sleek device. It resembled a tall, smooth obelisk, its surface laced with shifting patterns of energy. What exactly are we looking at here? Michael asked, leaning closer. Laera hesitated, then spoke. This is the etheric harmonizer. It's a technology we've been developing for generations, designed to restore and stabilize planetary ecosystems. We believe it could help your world heal some of the damage caused by industrialization. Elliot frowned, crossing his arms. This is the first I'm hearing of this. Why wasn't it mentioned earlier? Liara's gaze dropped briefly, her expression troubled. Our council decided not to reveal it until trust was more firmly established. There were fears that if the device was introduced too soon, it could be misunderstood or worse, seen as a form of control. Michael raised an eyebrow. Not exactly a vote of confidence in human nature. I disagreed with that decision, Laera said firmly, looking up again. I argued that transparency would foster trust, but the council overruled me. Now, with recent events, I feel it's time to bring this to the surface. Elliot and Michael exchanged glances. The tension in the room was palpable, the implications of Liara's revelation sinking in. If the etheric harmonizer was as powerful as she claimed, it could be a game-changer for Earth. But introducing such a device without proper groundwork could also lead to suspicion, panic, and potentially catastrophic misunderstandings. Elliot leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. Laera, if we're going to help you present this to Earth's leaders, we need more information. How does it work? What are the risks? And, most importantly, how do you plan to convince a planet full of skeptical humans that this isn't some kind of Trojan horse? Laera nodded. The etheric harmonizer uses a combination of advanced energy fields and molecular rebalancing to repair environmental damage. It doesn't create new matter or alter the planet's natural systems. Rather, it helps restore balance by accelerating natural recovery processes. Michael tapped the edge of the table, his face thoughtful. Okay, that's all well and good, but what happens if it fails? Or if someone tries to reverse engineer it and use it for something harmful? The device is designed to operate within very specific parameters, Laera explained. It's not a weapon and can't be easily converted into one. As for failure, the worst-case scenario is that it simply stops working. It doesn't produce any byproducts or cause harm if it ceases operation. Elliot still looked skeptical. You're asking us to trust that this device will be accepted and used as intended. That's a big leap of faith. I understand your concern, Laera said, but we're willing to train your scientists and engineers to understand and maintain the harmonizer. This wouldn't just be a gift, it would be a partnership. Michael leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. A partnership sounds good on paper, but convincing Earth's leaders won't be easy. They'll want guarantees, oversight, maybe even control. We're prepared to negotiate terms, Laera said. That's why I need your help. You're respected among your people, and you've worked closely with us. If you speak on our behalf, it could ease some of the mistrust. Elliot sighed, rubbing his temples. This is going to be a hard sell, even with our involvement. People are already on edge. They've barely begun to trust the Nivarians, and now we're supposed to introduce an advanced, mysterious piece of technology that no one's ever seen before? It's a perfect recipe for paranoia. Michael nodded. He's right. But if this thing really works, it could save countless lives and help reverse decades of environmental damage. That's not something we can just ignore. The three of them sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on them. Finally, Elliot straightened up, his expression resolute. All right, Laera, we'll help you present this to Earth's leaders. But we need full access to the harmonizer's documentation, a clear demonstration of its capabilities, and a solid plan for integrating it into our world without triggering a panic. Laera looked relieved. Thank you, Elliot. Thank you both. I'll provide all the documentation you need and arrange a demonstration. Together, we can show your people that this is a step forward, not a threat. Michael smirked. Well, here's hoping they see it that way. Let's get to work. Elliot and Michael stood just inside the lobby of the UN building, the air buzzing with muted tension. Delegates, security staff, and media correspondents hustled past in a swirl of muted voices and camera flashes. At the center of it all, Laera waited patiently, her hands clasped before her. Her calm, composed demeanor only made Elliot feel more uneasy. "Do you think this is going to work?" Michael asked, his tone low as they watched Laera from a few steps away. Elliot shrugged, keeping his voice equally quiet. "I don't know. But if we don't at least try to clarify things, the whole situation could go sideways fast." Michael glanced toward the main conference room doors, where representatives from several nations were already assembling. "You realize that half the people in there probably think we're walking into a setup, right? They'll be looking for any excuse to shut this down." Elliot nodded. "And that's why we have to be precise. No grandiose claims, no vague promises. Just the facts. We focus on the science and what the harmonizer can actually do." Before Michael could respond, Laera stepped over to them. Her glowing eyes met theirs, and she offered a faint smile. "It's almost time. Are you both prepared?" "As much as we can be," Elliot replied. "We'll handle the technical details, but you'll need to address the bigger picture. Why your people chose to share this with us, and why you're doing it now." Laera nodded. "Understood. I'll speak plainly, and I'll answer any questions they have." A uniformed UN official approached and motioned toward the conference room. "It's time. They're ready for you." Elliot glanced at Michael, who gave a faint nod. Together, they followed Laera into the room. The chamber was packed, every seat taken. Delegates from over 100 nations sat at their desks, while others lined the walls. The air felt heavy, the hum of quiet conversation dying as Laera took her place at the podium. Elliot and Michael sat off to the side, the etheric harmonizer's holographic model floating in front of them on a display. Laera began speaking, her voice clear and steady. She explained the harmonizer's purpose, detailing its ability to reverse environmental damage and stabilize ecosystems. She emphasized that it was not a weapon, not a tool of domination, but a means of healing. Elliot watched as her words seemed to settle over the room, some delegates leaning forward with interest while others remained stiff and skeptical. When she finished her opening statement, the floor opened for questions. The first came from a representative of a major industrial power. "How can we trust that this device won't be used to influence our governments? Even if it's not a weapon, it could become a form of leverage." Liara's calm didn't falter. "We understand your concern, and that's why we propose that the harmonizer's operation be overseen by an independent, multinational council. Its function is purely environmental. It cannot control people, only assist in the recovery of the planet's natural systems." Another delegate stood. "You claim it can repair ecosystems. Have you tested this on other worlds? What guarantees do we have that it won't fail?" Elliot stood at this point, nodding to Laera before addressing the assembly. "I can personally attest that the harmonizer's technology is unlike anything we've seen. We've reviewed the data from their trials on their own planet, and the results were consistent and safe. Of course, there will be rigorous independent testing before it's used here, but the science is solid." Michael added, "The device doesn't create new chemicals or release unknown substances. It accelerates natural healing processes. It's no more dangerous than rain restoring a dried-up riverbed." As more questions followed, Elliot and Michael supported Liara's efforts, clarifying the technical aspects while Laera handled the philosophical and ethical concerns. The session stretched on, and though some delegates remained visibly unconvinced, others began to nod, their expressions softening. But then, near the end of the Q&A, a representative from a small but influential nation stood. His voice was sharp, his gaze cold. "I appreciate your answers, but we've received reports that there are factions within your own council who opposed sharing this technology. Can you confirm that your government is fully unified in this decision?" Laera hesitated for the first time. She looked to Elliot and Michael before answering. "It's true that there was initial debate among my people. Some feared that revealing the harmonizer too soon might lead to misunderstandings. But after careful consideration, the council agreed that withholding such a tool would be a greater risk. We stand united in our offer to Earth." The room buzzed with murmurs. Elliot felt the tension shift, some delegates exchanging skeptical glances. Michael leaned closer and whispered, "This is the kind of question that sows doubt, even if her answer's solid." Elliot nodded, keeping his eyes on the podium. Laera handled the scrutiny well, but the damage was done. By the time the session ended, the delegates filed out with mixed expressions. Some intrigued, some cautious, and a few outright suspicious. As the room emptied, Elliot turned to Laera. "You did well. They threw everything at you, and you held your ground." Michael nodded. "Yeah, but you could see the cracks forming. Some of them are going to use this debate as an excuse to stall or outright reject the idea." Laera sighed softly, folding her hands in front of her. "I knew it wouldn't be easy, but at least we've begun the conversation. They can no longer say they didn't know." Elliot exchanged a glance with Michael. "We'll keep working at it. If this technology really can help Earth, we won't stop until it's understood and accepted." The lab was silent except for the hum of the harmonizer, its soft glow reflecting in the thick glass partitions. Elliot and Michael stood side by side, surrounded by a team of Earth scientists and Navarian engineers, all gathered for the long-awaited demonstration. It was a moment months in the making, one that could finally tip the scales of public opinion. Laera entered, wearing a uniform that shimmered faintly under the room's lights. She moved with her usual composed grace, carrying a small control panel in her hands. "I trust everyone is ready," she said, looking around the room. "We're as ready as we'll ever be," Michael replied, crossing his arms. "But let's hope this thing works as advertised." Elliot shot him a look. "It'll work. We've been through every calculation, every model. This is just the final step." Michael sighed. "I'm just saying, if this thing hiccups even once, we'll be dealing with a media storm. You know that, right?" "I know," Elliot said evenly. "But it's going to work." Laera gave a small nod, acknowledging the tension. She approached a central console, where the harmonizer's glowing obelisk-like structure stood encased in a transparent chamber. "This demonstration will target a simulated environment, one designed to mirror the conditions of a heavily degraded terrestrial ecosystem. If the harmonizer performs as intended, you will see a rapid restoration of balance and vitality." The gathered scientists murmured amongst themselves. Some were cautiously optimistic, while others were clearly skeptical. Dr. Anaya Patel, a renowned climatologist, raised her hand. "Laera, can you confirm the time frame for observable effects? Are we looking at minutes, hours, or longer?" Liara's voice remained steady. "Within minutes, you will see the initial indicators of success. Full stabilization should occur in under an hour, but the immediate changes will be unmistakable." Elliot caught a small smile on Michael's face and leaned in. "Feeling better now?" Michael shrugged. "A little. It's not every day you hear someone promise to fix a simulated disaster in under an hour." Laera activated the controls, and the harmonizer pulsed, a gentle vibration resonating through the room. The holographic environment appeared on the main screen. A barren wasteland, its soil cracked and lifeless, the air heavy with simulated pollutants. As the harmonizer worked, the changes began, subtle at first. The soil softened, faint traces of green emerged, and the air cleared visibly. The scientists watched in rapt attention. Dr. Patel whispered something to her assistant, who was frantically taking notes. Another researcher leaned forward, his eyes wide. "It's really happening," he muttered. Michael nudged Elliot. "See that guy over there?" He was ready to write this off. "Look at him now." Elliot nodded, unable to suppress his grin. "Yeah, I see it." As the minutes ticked by, the environment transformed further. Plants sprouted, growing with unnatural speed until patches of vibrant greenery spread across the once barren land. The air quality reading spiked, showing a dramatic reduction in pollutants. It was undeniable this technology worked. Laera stepped back, letting the results speak for themselves. The room was quiet, not out of skepticism, but out of sheer amazement. Dr. Patel finally broke the silence. This is incredible. I've never seen anything like it." "None of us have," Michael added. "Laera, you just turned skeptics into believers." Liara's calm expression softened slightly. I'm glad the demonstration was convincing, but now we must focus on the next step, ensuring this technology is deployed responsibly and effectively. Elliot turned to the other scientists. We'll need comprehensive studies, long-term monitoring plans, and an open dialogue with all nations. This can't be about political advantage or profit. It has to be about the planet. Dr. Patel stepped forward. You'll have my full support. I'll help organize a coalition of researchers to oversee the implementation. Michael clapped Elliot on the back. Looks like we're finally getting somewhere. Elliot smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time in months, he allowed himself a flicker of hope. Let's make sure we keep moving in the right direction. It was early morning on the coast, the sun inching above the horizon and painting the waves with golden light. Elliot and Michael stood on the beach, the etheric harmonizer safely installed nearby. Its sleek, glowing form a stark contrast to the natural beauty surrounding it. A faint mist hung in the air, and the sound of the ocean mingled with the hum of the device. This is it, Michael said, hands tucked into his jacket pockets. After all the arguments, all the meetings, all the trials, we're really doing it. Elliot nodded. Feels strange, doesn't it? Months of work, years of questions. And now it's finally happening. Behind them, Liara approached, her footsteps soft on the sand. She stopped a few feet away, gazing out at the water. It's beautiful, she said quietly. Your planet is unlike anything we've encountered. Elliot smiled faintly. And now we have the chance to make sure it stays that way. The three of them stood in silence for a moment, the enormity of the moment sinking in. It wasn't just about deploying a piece of alien technology. It was about changing how humans and Nivarians worked together, how they saw each other. So, what's the first step? Michael asked, glancing between Elliot and Liara. Liara tilted her head, considering. Once the harmonizer begins its initial cycle, we'll start to see subtle improvements. Cleaner air, healthier soil. From there, we'll expand its range gradually, ensuring stability before moving on to larger-scale implementation. And you're sure the council back on your homeworld is on board with this? Michael pressed. No last-minute surprises? Liara gave a small, reassuring smile. The council is fully committed. After the success of the trials, even the most cautious members agreed that Earth would benefit from the harmonizer. There's no more debate on our side. Elliot looked at Michael. What about our side? Any more opposition from the government? Michael shook his head. Not as much as you'd think. Once the science community got behind this, the politicians started falling in line. They're still keeping a close watch, of course. But it looks like we've got the green light. Good, Elliot said, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Then let's get started. Liara approached the harmonizer and placed her hand on its surface. The device emitted a soft, musical tone, its light intensifying slightly. She stepped back and gestured to Elliot. Would you like to initiate the sequence? Elliot hesitated. Me? Yes, Liara said. You've been a central part of this journey. It's only fitting. Elliot glanced at Michael, who gave a slight nod. Taking a steadying breath, Elliot stepped forward. He placed his hand on the harmonizer, feeling a gentle warmth beneath his palm. The device pulsed once, then began to glow steadily. Activation confirmed, Liara said softly. The harmonizer is now operational. The three of them watched as the device emitted faint waves of light, spreading outward across the landscape. Though the changes wouldn't be visible immediately, they all knew the process had begun. So, Michael said after a moment, breaking the silence. What now? Just sit back and let it work. Liara smiled. Not quite. We'll monitor the results closely. This is just the first step. There's still much to learn, much to refine. And after that? Elliot asked, his voice thoughtful. What happens when this project is finished? Liara looked at him, her expression unreadable. When this project is finished, we'll have the opportunity to collaborate on others. Earth and Nivarians can explore new ways to share knowledge and technology. perhaps even explore the stars together. Elliot turned to Michael, who raised an eyebrow. Exploring the stars, huh? Sounds a little ambitious. Elliot grinned. Since when did ambition stop us? Michael laughed. Fair point. The three of them stood on the beach as the sun climbed higher, casting a warm, golden light over the water. It was a quiet, unspoken moment of triumph. Not just for the technology, not just for the environmental recovery, but for the fact that two worlds, so different, so distant, had managed to find common ground.